Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradhari Jaya Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradhari Yashodanandana Brajajana Ranjana Yashodanandana Brajajana Ranjana Yamuna Tira Vanachari Yamuna Tira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradhari Yashodanandana Brajajana Ranjana Yamuna Tira Vanachari Yamuna Tira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jai Om Vishwabad Varmahus Prabhupada Ashtotar Shri Srimad Divine Grace Ese Bhakti Vedanta Swami Shri Prabhupada Ki Jai Prabhupada Paramahamsa Parivartikacharya Ashtotar Shri Srimad Divine Grace Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur Shri Prabhupada Ki Jai Ananta Koti Vaishnava Vrinda Ki Jai Namacharya Shri Haridas Thakur Ki Jai Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam Ki Jai All Gurus assembled devotees Hare Krishna All Gurus assembled devotees Hare Krishna All Gurus assembled devotees Hare Krishna All glories to Sri Sri Guru and Gauranga. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Narayanam Namaskrityam Naram Chaiva Naruttamam Devim Saraswatim Vyasam Tato Jaya Mudiraye Nashtaprayeshu Abhadreshu Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya Bhagavati Ruttama Shloke Bhaktir Bhavati Naishtiki Krishnaya Vasudevaya Devaki Nandanaya Cha Nanda Gopa Kumaraya Govindaya Namo Namaha. Hare Krishna. So verse is not written. Verse is not in a meter. So today we have 4 shlokas, as 3 shlokas do not have purport. So reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 5, Chapter 20, entitled The Structure of the Universe, verse number 34 to 37. Verse number 34, translation. Thereafter, beyond the ocean of sweet water and fully surrounding it is a mountain named Lokalok, which divides the countries that are full of sunlight from those not lit by the sun. Verse 35, translation. Beyond the ocean of sweet water is a tract of land as broad as the area between the middle of Mount Sumeru and the boundary of Manasottar mountain. In that tract of land, there are many living beings. Beyond it, extending to Lokalok mountain, is another land which is made of gold. Because of its golden surface, it reflects light like the surface of a mirror. And any physical article that falls on that land can never be perceived again. All living entities, therefore, have abandoned that golden land. Verse 36, translation. Between the lands inhabited by living entities and those that are uninhabited stands the great mountain which separates the two and which is therefore celebrated as Lokalok. Verse 37, translation and purport by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. Translation. By the supreme will of Krishna, the mountain known as Lokalok has been installed as the outer border of the three worlds, Bhurlok, Bhuvarlok and Swarlok, to control the rays of the sun throughout the universe. All the luminaries from the sun up to Dhruvalok distribute their rays throughout the three worlds, but only within the boundary formed by this mountain. Because it is extremely high, extending even higher than Dhruvalok, it blocks the rays of the luminaries, which therefore can never extend beyond it. Purport. When we speak of Lokatraya, we refer to the three primary planetary systems, Bhu, Bhuva and Swa, into which the universe is divided. Surrounding these planetary systems are the 8 directions, namely East, West, North, South, Northeast, Southeast, Northwest and Southwest. Lokalok mountain has been established as the outer boundary of all the lokas to distribute the rays of the sun and other luminaries equally throughout the universe. This vivid description of how the rays of the sun are distributed throughout the different planetary systems of the universe is very scientific. Shukadeva Goswami described these universal affairs to Maharaj Parikshit as he had heard about them from his predecessor. He explained these facts 5,000 years ago, but the knowledge existed long before because Shukadeva Goswami received it through disciplic succession. Because this knowledge is accepted through the disciplic succession, it is perfect. The history of modern scientific knowledge, on the contrary, does not go back more than a few hundred years. Therefore, even if modern scientists do not accept the other factual presentations of Srimad Bhagavatam, how can they deny the perfect astronomical calculations that existed long before they could imagine such things? There is so much information to gather from Srimad Bhagavatam. Modern scientists, however, have no information of other planetary systems, and indeed are hardly conversant with the planet on which we are now living. Om Ajnanatimirandhasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Sthapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayyam Tadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Gurum Shri Utapatakabalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunathanvitam Tam Sachivam Sadvaitam Savadhutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakhanvitamscha Nama Om Vishnupadaya Krishna Pristhaya Bhutale Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swami Niti Namine Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Deshatarine Nama Om Vishnupadaya Krishna Pristhaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Niti Namine Vancha Kalpa Tarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhya eva cha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Namo Mahavadanyaya Krishna Prema Pradayate Krishnaya Krishna Chaitanya Namine Gauratvishe Namaha He Krishna Karuna Sindho Dinabandho Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Srivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Hare Krishna. So we are reading from Srimad Bhagavatam. Reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 5, entitled Structure of the Universe. We are reading from verses 34 to 37. The section which is currently going on is about Jambudweep and surrounding layers of oceans, further by other dweeps, and right now we are in the last dweep, Pushkar Dweep, and also beyond Pushkar Dweep. So the description is about Lokalok mountain. So we'll try to see a brief description. The entire Bhagavatam is not on the PPT. One part is on the structure of the universe, little bit of it, just to get a background of what we are talking about as Lokalok mountain. Otherwise, we may not even be aware of Sahyadri within the Pune range, and we are talking about Lokalok in terms of what are we discussing and are we able to relate with what is happening here. So that is one part of that, and second part we'll discuss in terms of inner and outer boundaries, as Prabhupada in the purport mentions that Lokalok is the outer boundary of the universe. So we'll discuss on that, inner and outer boundaries. That is, both of that is within the PPT. And the third part we'll be discussing about how Srimad Bhagavatam has so much information, and unfortunately scientists oppose. Although there is so much facts present in Srimad Bhagavatam, but unfortunately still scientists are not able to accept that. So that's the third part which is not in the PPT. Hare Krishna. So talking about the universe, it's a very complicated structure. It's just like a small ant which is trying to understand how a banyan tree is functioning in terms of the leaves, the roots, the branches, and or if any fruits or anything else. So in terms of the insignificant position of the living entity, trying to understand the expansiveness of the universe, micro level and macroscopic level. It is not possible from an inductive knowledge. It is not possible on our own efforts. But that is one of the main reasons why we rely on Shastras, why we rely on Vedic literatures, which is Shabda Praman. For a small child, it is so easy to learn about the things that he is looking around, what he is observing. Just ask his mother, his father, his near and dear ones, and he gets the correct information as it is, without any dilution. Similarly, the scriptures as mother are indicating to the living entities, are actually providing information about what is happening in the universe in a very, very systematic way. Now again, to give a background, it's like 5th canto, there is so much information. There is begins with Priyavrat Maharaj, Agnidra, and so on and so forth. There is Nabhi, Rishabdev, and then eventually there is Bharat Maharaj chapter. So many chapters are there. And now after that forest of material enjoyment, again the focus is shifting on in terms of the universe, Parishad Maharaj is inquiring that he wants to know about the universe. And as Prabhupada very clearly explains, since he is not seeing it disconnected with Krishna, it is not material. Since he is seeing the universe as coming from Krishna, because it is coming from Krishna, we are not discussing some material mundane subject matter, but because it is the creation of the Lord, Parishad Maharaj wants to know in detail about the universe. Of course, from his perspective, he was about to leave in 7 days, and still he was interested to know about the universe. So at least we can try to discuss a little bit more in terms of what's happening. So since the discussion is about Lokalok mountain, just to give a background in terms of what is happening here. So this is what Prabhupada mentions in the pages of Bhagavatam. This diagram is there. It's little small in terms of reading also, and it is difficult to understand from this. So eventually in the further slides, we are trying to make it a little more, add some color in it, and also make it step by step, so there is an understanding. But this is what is presented in the Bhagavatam pages. If you, just for an overview perspective, on the center is Mount Sumeru, and then there are all the dvipas, beginning with Jambu Dvip, and then there are oceans surrounding it, and further dvips, and the last is the Pushkar Dvip. And the two dotted lines in between, one dotted line you can see in the penultimate circle, which is called as a Manasottar mountain, which we'll discuss further in the further slides, just to give a brief from this pages. And towards the top part, again you see dotted blue part, that is Lokalok mountain. That is what is the description in the verse, in these current verses today. So as we can see, Brahmanda, it's a Anda in terms of structure. And there is Bhumandal. Of course, Bhumandal is not Earth. Bhumandal is a very, very large plane. In Bhumandal, we will see how there is, Bharatvarsha is also there, but it's a very, very, very tiny portion in Bhumandal. But amongst the different planetary systems, then there is, beginning, or rather in the middle planetary systems, we can talk about as Bhulok. Then there are planets which are above, Bhuvarlok, Svargalok, Maharlok, Janalok, Tapalok, Satyalok. And then of course there are planets which are below, Atala, Vitala, Sutala, Talatal, Mahatal, Rasatal and Patal. So Bhulok is in the middle planetary systems out of the 14. Otherwise, if we consider from the 14 planetary systems perspective, then the 3, Bhu, Bhuva and Swa, they can also be considered as the middle planetary systems, which Prabhupada refers in the purport as Lokatraya. The 3 planets which is considered as the middle planetary of the planetary systems. And factually or incidentally, Lokalok mountain is the one which prevents, because it is so high, as taller than even Dhruvalok. Because it is so high, the rays of the sun are not able to go beyond Bhu, Bhuva and Swa. Jai Shri Radha Vrindavan Chandra Bhagavan ki Jai, Shri Shri Jagannath Baladev Subhadra Maiya ki Jai, Shri Shri Gaur Nitai ki Jai, Shri Prabhupada ki Jai. So because the Lokalok mountain is so tall, taller than Dhruvalok, the sun's rays are not able to go beyond Bhu, Bhuva and Swa. That is what is the description given in the Bhagavatam. Of course, in terms of coloring, it's the lower planets are in red, that is prohibited. The upper ones are, that is also debatable. Of course, from a Bhagavatam perspective, all should be in red. Abrahma Bhuvana Loka, Punaravartino Arjuna. But for description and for understanding, we have made the different combinations. So our insignificant position from Lord Vishnu, the lotus flower is emanating. And then on the top is Lord Brahma. And then of course in the stalk of the stem of the lotus flower, there is the 14 planetary systems. Of the 14 planetary systems, we are talking about the Bhumandal. And as I said, as Bhagavatam describes, Bhumandal is not Earth planet. Bhumandal is that plane of the 14 planetary systems. That is one of the 14 planetary systems. And in Bhumandal, there are many dvipas, Sapta Dvip, 7 dvips. of which one is Jambu Dweep. And in Jambu Dweep there are 9 Varshas. The other Dweeps have 7 Varshas, and except the last one, Pushkara Dweep has 2 Varshas. But Jambu Dweep has 9 Varshas, of which one is Bharatvarsh. And of course, then if we drill down further, zoom in and zoom out, if we drill down further, then we may have India, then we may have Pune, and then it continues. It may have Kondwa and Tilekarnagar and NVCC and so on and so forth. Like when Tamal Krishna Maharaj had once approached Prabhupada and he was told about this. There's a huge universe, and then there is, and then there is a world, then there is New York, and then here is a temple, and here is a person who thinks he is the temple president. Like that Prabhupada was trying to explain. It's like a zoom out perspective. So it's our insignificant position, but we are trying to understand the structure of the universe. But because it is given in the Srimad Bhagavatam, and to some extent we can understand, at the same time it's quite a complicated subject matter in terms of making a map out of this. But whatever little references are there, we're just trying to understand that the top left is the same picture, Brahmanda, that is the Anda, and Bhumandal in the middle planetary systems. And in Bhumandal there are Dweeps and the oceans. So on the right side what we see, the circular, the flat portion, it reminds me like a cow dung cake. You can see it will be similar. Whenever you see a cow dung cake, you can see something similar, because there is hands, Rekha is there. So the downmost, that is the Himalayas, and the Bharatvarsha will be the one small portion. Will be explained in the next slide also, just to give that reference. So the circular portion, that is the Jambu Dweep, and on top, which is Sumeru mountain, which is solid gold, 84,000 yojanas on top. It's beyond calculations. And on the top, on the bottom left, that is the same, which is given in a horizontal understanding. So what we see as lines, those are actually the mountains which are segregating the different Varshas. The Jambu Dweep has 9 Varshas, and that is being segregated by the mountains, which is represented in the small line. Of course, many things have already been covered. It is just to give a reference towards Lokalok. That's what we are coming here. So we are not going to get into the details of this, but Jambu Dweep typically represents the 9 Varshas, and you can see on the leftmost one, the circular part of this, where the bottommost part is Bharatvarsh in pink. Bharatvarsh, and then the black portion, that is called as Himalayas. Then there is Kimpurusha Varsha and further. So Jambu Dweep having 9 Varshas, and there we are able to, on the right side we are able to see that more clear, Mount Meru, that is a mountain of solid gold. And then we can see the Himalayas is represented by just that one line. This is that flat portion, Jambu Dweep, and Bharatvarsha is on the one corner of it, which is like a bow shaped, and then Himalayas segregating between the different Varshas. So we will see that now. This is like a zoom out. Now step by step what we can understand is this is Jambu Dweep, what we saw in the previous one, and then talking about the different oceans surrounding it. So basically Bhumandal is made up of Dweepas and oceans and Varshas. Dweepas, there are 7, Sapto Dweep, and each Dweep, of course, Jambu Dweep is 9 Varshas. Remaining all Dweeps are 7 Varshas, except the last Pushkar Dweep, which will be 2 Varshas. And in between the Dweeps, there are oceans which are surrounding. So after Jambu Dweep, in the middle of Jambu Dweep, there is Sumeru mountain, which is an inverted cone structure. And surrounding Jambu Dweep is saltwater ocean. So it's like one by one. Jambu Dweep surrounded by saltwater ocean. The saltwater ocean is further surrounded by the Dweeps. I have marked it by green. All the Dweeps will be green in this structure. The saltwater ocean is surrounded by Lakshadweep, which is surrounded by a further ocean, which is sugarcane ocean, which is in dark green. Further is surrounded by another Dweep, which is Shalmali Dweep, which is further surrounded by an ocean of liquor. Right? Then further one more Dweep, which is called as Kusha Dweep, which is surrounded by an ocean of clarified butter, yellowish. Right? So we have Jambu Dweep surrounded by an ocean, again surrounded by Dweep, again an ocean, again surrounded by Dweep, again an ocean. So till now 4 is done, 3 more are pending. After this clarified butter ocean, again a Dweep, which is marked in green, which is Krauncha Dweep, and further surrounding Krauncha Dweep is a milk ocean. So one more layer. Then further one more Dweep. This is Shaka Dweep, and this is going to be surrounded by another ocean, which is Yogurt Ocean. After this is the last Dweep, which is called as Pushkara Dweep. And this is surrounded by clear water ocean. That is also in blue. So this is how the 7 Dweepas are there, and then there is oceans encircling or surrounding, we can say. And in the Pushkara Dweep, now we can notice attentively, in Pushkara Dweep, in that green portion, there is that dotted line, brown dotted line, which is called as Manasottar mountain. It is called as Manasottar mountain. That's how Pushkara Dweep having only 2 Varshas. That is, Manasottar mountain is dividing it into 2. Manasottar is about 10,000 yojanas, like Sumeru is 84,000, Manasottar is 10,000 yojanas. And in the description of Pushkara Dweep, Prabhupada also mentions there is the sun is orbiting around the Manasottar mountain. It is encircling Meru, because Meru is in the center, the yellow in the middle. But on the Manasottar mountain, in the Pushkara Dweep, on the Manasottar range, the sun is orbiting. And now the description is about Lokalok. So Lokalok is further away. And it is described that the Lokalok height is much more than even Dhruvaloka. So high that the sun's rays are not able to penetrate that, because of which beyond Bhu, Bhuva and Swa, sun rays cannot go further. So this it is, of course, this is not made out of scale dimensions. The dimensions, it is described Sumeru mountain to the first dotted, which is Manasottar, is the same as the distance between Manasottar to Lokalok, which is actually 1 billion miles, which is actually 1/4 of the diameter of the universe. It's so huge. So that is the last one, is the Lokalok mountain. And in the purport, Prabhupada is explaining about the Lokalok also. Of course, this is just a brief description in terms of the Dweepas and its ocean which is surrounded by, and the Varshas. So in Lokalok about the Lokalok, Prabhupada is explaining, there is on the bottom portion we can see there is inhabited land. Beyond the Lokalok mountain, that is called as Aloka Varsha. So why the name Lok, Alok? So below that or before that or within that, that is inhabited. It is Lok. And beyond is Alok. Nobody is inhabiting there. So it is called Aloka Varsha, uninhabited land. And within the inhabited land also, the last portion touching the Lokalok mountain range is a golden plain, a full land which is golden. Prabhupada in the translation mentioned that anything that falls there, it's gayab, it becomes imperceptible. So people have abandoned that land. That's what is mentioned. So abandoned, it may mean that people were staying and they have left, or because of knowing the nature of the place, they are not even going there. Just imagine a place which is full of, the whole place is gold. How will it be? So that's the whole golden land which is touching the Lokalok mountain. I'll skip this because it is too much of description on that. Anyway, this is just to mention about the borders, coming to the borders, about the outer and inner boundaries. So as we see in the center there is earth, and then the first circle which is green, which is the Manasottar mountain, that is a range. And the second green, outermost green, is the Lokalok. If you see the dimension, the distance is the same. Don't go into the other circles. This is just to talk about the boundaries, just to reflect about the boundaries. Manasottar is one of the boundaries, and Lokalok is the outermost boundary. So, talking about the inner and outer boundaries, as Prabhupada is saying, Lokalok is the outermost boundary. So, to understand from our perspective, boundaries, what they mean, how to identify inner or outer boundary, and what do they offer, what does an outer boundary offer, and what does an inner boundary offer. So, what we can decipher, or some of the lessons that we can understand from an outer boundary, or in general boundary is, it's like we can say a line of control. So just don't go beyond, like a boundary is there. Or it can be understood as like a prohibition, restricted area, something like that. Or wherever there is a security, for going inside, coming out, whatever, there is a security required. So there is a boundary. And at the same time, since we are talking about inner and outer boundaries, like a society may have an outer boundary, compound wall, a security may be there. Or even if you take a temple structure, there is an outer boundary, there is a main gate. There may be other gates also, but still there is a main gate. And so one is an outer boundary. Within that, there can be multiple inner boundaries. Within that, there can be multiple places which are like designated, of which some may be public and some may be private. And that's the reality of any place, right? Whether it is a house, whether it is a compound, whether it's a temple structure, any structure, institution or something. There are some private places, there are some public places. So the inner boundaries would mean like a private place, small. So the outer boundaries, what it can offer, it is actually a security check. That means prohibition. Do not go beyond line of control or Lakshman Rekha. Do not cross beyond. But within that outer, then there are many which are inner circles, which are inner boundaries. That is a comparison with the Manasottar mountain, which is the inner. How to identify whether it's an inner boundary or an outer boundary? It depends on where we are. When we are in Jambudvip, not if we are in the Bharatvarsh part. So then Manasottar is also outer. It's an outer boundary. And Lokalok is further outer boundary. But for those who are in the Lokalok Varsh, which is habited, people are staying there, for them Manasottar is an inner boundary. Depending on where we are placed. Like sometimes we see in the map, where we are, first floor, second floor, fourth floor, or within a floor also there is a map, lift is here, exit is here, and like that. So depending on where we are, we have to trace from that reference point. Similarly, whether it's an inner boundary or an outer boundary will depend on where we are and in terms of how we are able to relate with this. So outer basically means about prohibition, or it's like line of control things. See, the outer and inner will have a different layers or levels of securities. Outer, for example, the LOC, India-Pakistan border, BSF, Border Security Forces. Those Jawans are, much more qualified, efficient, and it's a very high level, very, very strongly trained. But even between states, there can be borders. Between Maharashtra and Gujarat, there will be a border. But that border security forces need not be as strict and as stringent as between India and Pakistan or whatever other periphery of the country, right? So that's what we mean as outer boundary and inner boundaries. Outer boundary is like a strict no. You just should not, prohibited. Inner boundaries are actually offering privacy or space. Although there is an outer boundary, it's like although there is a main gate of the temple, but within that there is temple hall is there, there is a gift stall is there, Govindas is there, Brahmachari ashram is there. Some are private access, some are public access. Right? Within the outer gate, still there is so many, in database we'll call it as entities, so many structures within, which offers that space, that inner boundary actually helps to offer the space and the privacy part of it. And there can be a categorization. Sometimes it's called as sajatiya, grouping or a categorization. Like-minded people can come together and they form small inner circles, although there can be a total big outer circle. So just 2 more slides on this in terms of the boundary part. In the context of going beyond the outer boundary, as we are talking about prohibition or a line of control. So beyond the outer boundary, in the context of human life, it would mean breaking the regulative principles. Because as per Varnashram, there is like animal life, human life and godly life. So in terms of following regulative principles, that then a person comes to the platform of human being. So in the context of human life, going beyond the outer boundary would mean breaking the regulative principles. In the context of civilization, going beyond outer boundary would mean committing sinful activities. And in the context of spiritual life, going beyond outer boundary, that's like the Lakshman Rekha, final, where it is committing Vaishnava Aparadh. Then everything gets sort of, account is locked. So that is going beyond that outer boundary. This is the last slide in this. So in terms of the different fields that we can see, there is on the right side what we see is a beyond outer boundary, that is a clear prohibition. But although there is a clear prohibition for some things, there are a lot of things which are allowed within the inner boundaries. So I'll give an example. 3-4 examples are taken here. Is it visible? The first one is books. I think because of the color it is not being so visible. Books. What is the outer boundary? Mundane literatures, magazines, etc. So many things can come in that, etc. Typically, just put it as mundane, right? But what is inner boundaries? That means what is allowed, and what is allowed or what is recommended is reading of Vedic literatures. But within the realm of reading of Vedic literatures, we can still have a range, which for convenience perspective, I put it in just 3 columns, but it can, the range, it can be an unlimited range of multiple columns depending on the mindset of people, which typically will range from conservative to liberal. I'm not sure if this is it's a little difficult to explain, and that's why I'm trying to give some examples. So the Vedic literature, that means the scope, what is allowed is Vedic literature. But some may say, let's read only Prabhupada books. Only books written by Prabhupada. Some may say, we are okay with any ISKCON books. There are Prabhupada disciples also have written, or there are contemporaries, or maybe the Prabhupada grand disciples, so many, right? ISKCON books. Then there is another range which is religious books, which may not be ISKCON perspective. So we are not talking here about right and wrong. We are talking about a range of conservative to liberal. But all that is within multiple inner boundaries, which is the Vedic literatures. As it is not going on the moment it goes to mundane literature and magazine, that is outer boundary. But within that outer boundary, there are multiple inner boundaries, which is what I am trying to give an example here. So just to give 2-3 more quick examples to understand that. So all that will still be under one circle. All that conservative to liberal range which is there. In terms of food, this should be easy. Outer boundary, unoffered, which is prohibited food. Of course, there are many other prohibited foods. Within what is allowed is prasadam. But when we say prasadam, again, there are so many categorizations. Then there can be temple prasad, then there can be home court prasad, then there can be Govindas, and then there can be furthermore. For convenience, I have but only 3. But all those form in the circle of prasad. Then again, if somebody is very conservative, then he may not be able to accept the last part also. He will not be able to digest the last part. So things like that depends on conservative to liberal. That is a range. Again, I repeat, we are not discussing about right and wrong. We are talking about the range which is there. So much scope of accommodation which is possible. Where one wants to be, that each one of us has to decide. Rather than saying this is right and that is wrong, each one also has to decide. And of course, based on our decision, each one will get different destination as well. The impact also will be accordingly, right? So that also falls as one portion. Similarly, there is association. I'll just go quick. Of course, the outer boundary is Mayavadis, impersonalists, and etc. So many others will coming in that. Then amongst what is allowed, only Vaishnavas. But then when we say only Vaishnavas, we can again have categories. Somebody may say only within the spiritual master groups, only within ISKCON Vaishnavas, or other Sampradaya Vaishnavas. So just a range of conservative to liberal approach. Similarly about sound, mundane, the beyond outer boundaries, the mundane songs, and what is allowed is only kirtans. Within that, somebody may profess only about Prabhupada tune. Many would say that Prabhupada sang only Prabhupada tune, no other tunes. Then there are some who are okay for it's as long as it's Hare Krishna, what's wrong if it's classical, if it's something else. Then there are another category which talk about having a Hare Krishna. And there are those who are singing Hare Krishna in rock music, but it's still Hare Krishna. So that's the range of conservative to liberal. Depending on which box we are in, we are unable to handle the other box, people in other box. If we fall in a category of let's sing only Prabhupada tune, and if we hear somebody singing rock Hare Krishna, rock Hare Krishna means Hare Krishna tune in rock music. So that is like intolerable. That is almost tending towards the mundane. That's because that is a range, that is a distance, because of which one is not able to tolerate. So outer boundary is a strict prohibition, but within that outer boundary, there are multiple inner boundaries, which if we traverse, we learn to handle diversity. If we travel from one inner boundary to another within what is allowed, then we learn to handle diversity. We may develop some maturity. There might be some growth. But at the same time, the cons is there is possibility of dilution. And in terms of conservatives, if you simply remain in one, then we don't learn to accommodate how Krishna can be manifested in multiple ways. We are not able to accommodate that how, as Krishna says, Yadyad Vibhuti Mat Sattvam, his glory is being spread, but we will not be able to identify and we will not be able to acknowledge or appreciate how Krishna consciousness is presented in other ways also. So that is how there are pros and cons from the traveling from one circle to another circle. Of course, that beyond outer boundary, that is clear. That's not a gray zone. But within, then there is a little bit of gray zone. So that is how we can understand about the outer and inner boundaries. And towards the end, Srila Prabhupada talks about the glory of Bhagavatam. So much information is present in Srimad Bhagavatam, but unfortunately, the scientists are unable to, in one sense we can say accept, or in another sense we can say they flatly deny, oppose. Although there are factual informations present in the Bhagavatam, scientists are just flatly refusing to accept because it is in Bhagavatam. They consider that this is mythology or not acceptable. So, Prabhupada mentions that even what to speak of even this planet, even this planet scientists are not explored entirety. But we comment about other planets, going to other planets or commenting about other planets. It is just like we are not able to know our own bodies and minds, but we comment about others' bodies and others' minds. So similarly, scientists have not even explored what is there in this planetary system, but we are talking a lot about going to other planetary systems. And the basic level of rebel which is there, which is what makes them not able to accept. That means there is no open-mindedness. Like if you talk about modern lives, they talk about UCC, Uniform Civil Code. So they say there are some groups which basically oppose. Now this opposition is coming even before a draft proposal is presented. Now you can think about, it's deep rooted. Before the proposal is presented, it's like if we say that we are going to make a law. No. We don't want. Before the proposal is presented only, there is opposition, which basically means whatever you make, we are going to oppose, irrespective of what you make. That's basically the tendency of the demons. Like when there was Mandara Manthan, churning of the milk ocean, and the demigods and demons, both of them were supposed to churn when the milk ocean part, and then below there was Kurma Avatar, and then on top there is Mandara mountain. So then it was to be churned, and then they needed a long rope. So they had invited Vasuki, and Vasuki agreed to become the rope, encircling the mountain, and one side demigods, one side demons. And when the demons were given the tail portion of Vasuki, said that you handle this side and the demigods will handle the front side wala. The demons immediately felt, Aho Pucham, what is this? You are giving me the tail portion. This is not acceptable. We want the front portion only. So they took the front portion. It was given to them. Eventually, when the churning happened, Vasuki was emanating so many poisonous fumes, all that the demons had to go through. But the point to make is that there is a nature to oppose. Similarly, Prabhupada says the scientists are just opposing what is there in Bhagavatam without even understanding or without even taking it factually. There is so much information present in Srimad Bhagavatam. There is information about astronomical calculations. There is information about measurement of time, relativity of time. Today, if we go to Konark, in there, the Konark temple, you'll find there is chariots, there are wheels made, and if we take some guides, they can explain so much in detail about the time could be calculated by looking at the shadow. At which time, where the shadow is, based on that, the time can be calculated. What to speak of just time getting calculated? There are so many measurements of time. Like we talk about only hours and minutes and seconds. Then there are, of course, for multiple calculations, we may say milliseconds and nanoseconds. But Bhagavatam talks much more, Nimesh, much more detail about the measurement of time, calculations of time, even about relativity of time. There are so many scientists who have mentioned about relativity of time. Bhagavatam talks about it. When people go from this planet to, like for some time when, who was that, Mandata? Who had gone to meet Brahma. Revati's, okay. So he had gone to meet Brahma, and Brahma was busy with some music, and eventually afterwards when Brahma came to attend to him, by the time he comes back to the planets, it's like so many yugas have passed. So there's a relativity of time is there. So much Bhagavatam talks about Pushpak Viman, which we may today talk about as we are making aeroplanes, but then still it requires fuel. Pushpak Viman could, today there is so much fuel crisis. Pushpak Viman could just travel without any fuel, and just had the mind with the person who is driving. That's why it is required to be sense controlled. The driver has to be sense controlled. There is Pushpak Viman, there is so much. Bhagavatam talks about, about the Mahabharata, it talks about the Kauravas, right? 100 Kauravas in the womb. Eventually, when as a lump of matter, when it comes out, then they are put into the pots, which is comparable to a test tube babies. And this is not even inside the womb of the mother. This is outside, even the further processing also. So there is so much, and what to speak of the third canto, Kapila Muni section, where Bhagavatam talks about the growth of the child in the embryo, how the child is growing in the embryo. Today we have to put some machines and try to find out, but Bhagavatam mentions what happens in the first month, second month, so much detail is there. So in spite of these details, unfortunately scientists rebel, they just want to oppose. Oh, if it is in Bhagavatam, we deny, we do not accept this. Although there is so much of astronomical calculation, everything mentioned in detail. So Prabhupada towards the end mentions, there is so much information to gather from Srimad Bhagavatam. Modern scientists, however, have no information of other planetary systems. So this so much information is not just dry information. Like today people may go to Google and search, there is only information. But is that processed information? Is that something which is there some regulatory body to authorize that information? But if we talk about Srimad Bhagavatam, the information is very substantial, very meaningful, very authorized, presented by acharyas coming in disciplic succession. So the very first verse of Srimad Bhagavatam talks about, establishes the absolute truth. Janmadya Sayata Anvaya Aditya Swarat Satyam Param Dhimahi. The very first verse of Srimad Bhagavatam establishes the absolute truth. The second verse of Srimad Bhagavatam removes unwanted information. Like we are talking about, it has so much information. First is to remove that unwanted information. Dharma projita kaitavatra. So dharma projita, all the cheating kaitava religions are being removed. And very third verse, it talks about cultivating the right desires. What information should I actually access? Nigamakalpataror galitam phalam shukamukhadamrtadravya samyutam pivata bhagavatam rasamalayam muhuraho rasika bhuvi bhavuka. What should I actually aspire for? What should I actually taste? Vedic literature is compared to a tree, and Srimad Bhagavatam is the ripened fruit of this Vedic literature. So it is not just information. It is not mundane information, it is spiritual information. It is spiritual information which is authorized. It is presented by acharyas in disciplic succession. And right in the first 3 verses we get so much information. What to speak of the 12 cantos and the 18,000 verses of Srimad Bhagavatam. How much more information is there and how much it is purifying. Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya. When we attend the Srimad Bhagavatam on a consistent basis, how much it is purifying. So that is the great glory, and we can definitely be so grateful to Srila Prabhupada for presenting that Srimad Bhagavatam. Otherwise it would have been so inaccessible. If it's in Sanskrit, how many of us would be able to access that? And today we have it in English translations, word-to-word translation, purport, and then there are so many elaborations, so many Prabhupada disciples and many other grand disciples, many are elaborating further on the purports of Srimad Bhagavatam. So there is so much to learn from Srimad Bhagavatam, and as literature actually explained, Purana Argo Adunodita, it's actually the sun which has risen to give light in this dark age of Kali Yuga. So Srimad Bhagavatam is non-different than Krishna, Srimad Bhagavatam. So we can be grateful to the acharyas who have presented us this Srimad Bhagavatam, and we are also grateful to all the devotees who have very wonderfully churned this Srimad Bhagavatam, and based on which we have more and more information and more devotion towards the Supreme Lord and His devotees. Hare Krishna. Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Gaura Bhakta Vrinda ki jai. Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna. So we saw 3 sections. One was about the structure of the universe, which was from the PPT part, Lokalok mountain. But to arrive at the Lokalok, we saw the Dvipas ranging from Jambu Dvip to all the further Dvipas and the oceans. And Loka Loka is the outer boundary. The next we discussed about an outer boundaries from the conservative to the liberal, which is within the inner boundaries, but outer boundary is talking about prohibitions. And finally about the glory of Srimad Bhagavatam, and unfortunately how scientists deny the factual presentations of the Srimad Bhagavatam, but yet Srimad Bhagavatam is glorious in itself, which is non-different than Krishna. Hare Krishna. Thank you. Any comments? Anybody wants to comment? Or any questions? I can take personal if it's later. Thank you. Hare Krishna.